The inside.
For clothes that Tristan lost. At Bold 3 Detergent Plus Fabric Softener.
In one final burst, the Sixers put the championship away.
Let's move on to Philadelphia and this whole Joel Embiid situation and this NBA investigation into Joel Embiid not playing in these first 3 games and what the situation is with him health-wise. I think we've gone from trust the process to blame the plan. Here's
the Philadelphia 76ers, a franchise rich in history, boasting a lineup of some of the greatest players ever to grace the NBA hardwood. Wilt Chamberlain, Julius Dr. J. Irving, Moses Malone, Allen Iverson, and many more. Yet despite this abundance of talent, the 76ers have only secured 3 championships, the last of which was all the way in 1983. How did a team with such illustrious figures manage to fall short of the ultimate prize for so long? The story of the 76ers is a complex tapestry of triumphs and tribulations marked by fierce competition, pivotal injuries, managerial missteps, and the relentless pursuit of a championship dream. In the mid-2010s, the 76ers embarked on one of the most controversial and ambitious rebuilds in NBA history, the process. This strategy invoked intentionally losing games to secure high draft picks and rebuild the team from the ground up. It was a gamble that divided opinions, with some heralding it was a necessary move and others condemning it as detrimental to the spirit of the game. The process brought hope and heartbreak in equal measure. While it yielded some promising talent and moments of brilliance, it also led to years of mediocrity and missed opportunities. Management turnover, roster changes, and playoff disappointments all contributed to the ongoing struggle to realize the championship vision. Join us as we delve into the highs and lows of the Philadelphia 76ers, exploring the factors that have shaped their journey from greatness to despair and back again.
Andrew McCarthy is interested in more than just a good. Listen, he's having no trouble.
Could you say it again?
Pressing the rewind button to the 76ers' last success, we travel over 40 years ago to the 1983 NBA season. The internet and cell phones were just invented. Michael Jackson's Beat It was played on every radio station. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were at the forefront of basketball, but even more successful than them that season was Philly. With a roster consisting of Moses Malone, Dr. J, Andrew Toney, Maurice Cheeks, and more, the team wasn't just known for their dominant season over the Celtics and Lakers with 65 wins, but prior to the MJ Bulls or Warriors with KD, they were often debated to be the greatest team of all time. Cunningham's ability as coach to adapt his game plan based on the opponent in in-game situations was another key factor. Whether it was making defensive adjustments or exploiting mismatches on offense, Cunningham's flexibility kept the team competitive and often ahead of their rivals. Philly was able to excel on both ends, resulting in 5th in the league in both offense and defense, with the top net rating as a result. Quote, the 1983 NBA Finals would go down in history as one of the most lopsided series of all time, led by Moses Malone's famous fo-fo-fo prediction. The 76ers swept the Lakers in 4 games to claim their 3rd NBA championship in franchise history. Moses Malone was named Finals MVP after averaging a staggering 25.8 points and 18 rebounds per game in the series, further solidifying his status as one of the greatest big men of all time. The 1982-1983 Philadelphia 76ers will forever be remembered as a team that epitomized the values of teamwork, perseverance, and championship excellence, led by their iconic trio and fortified by a roster of talented players. They achieved basketball immortality and etched their names in the annals of NBA history. This is the goal the 76ers had been building towards for years. After some failures throughout the Wilt era and going into the 70s, they had 3 close chances over the previous 6 years. The favored 76ers blew a 2-0 lead to the Portland Trail Blazers in 1977. 3 years later, rookie Magic Johnson closed out the Sixers at the Spectrum Arena. The next year, the team took a 3-1 lead into Game 5 against the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, and then lost the next 3 in a row. The 76ers succumbing to the Lakers in 1982 without calamity felt quaint. Luckily, the 76ers' new owner, Harold Katz, was a huge basketball fan and actually invested into the team's success a lot more than many of the hands-off owners. Having bought the team a year earlier in 1982, he said, "I didn't buy the team for money. I bought it to win." Another executive at the time said about him, "He had a dish in his backyard. He could pick up college games late into the night. Harold was a night person. So then he'd call me the next day and say, 'What do you think of this kid at New Mexico State?' I would respond, 'Harold, I was asleep.'" As the owner, he started crunching the numbers and deciding what can be done. Quote, "I was taking my family to Lake Tahoe. If I just started jotting down numbers, I said, if I did this, if I did that, I could probably match and get Moses Malone." To make it work though, Moses Malone was offered a $13 million contract. The executive Pat Williams even joked, which today would pay just the ball boy. But back then, that was staggering. To put that in perspective in today's money, that's about the deal Kyrie has with the Mavs. It was a big deal. Even other teams, for instance, such as Dan, center for the Denver Nuggets, said they had almost an all-star team as a starting lineup. Unfortunately, the same building blocks that made the championship roster would also be the same pillars that would lead the franchise to crumble under its foundation going forward.
Been confined.
Another place. They're agreeing.
After winning the NBA championship in 1983, the 76ers remained competitive but struggled to reach the same heights. During this season, the 76ers had several solid seasons but failed to advance past the second round of the playoffs. Dr. J was getting older, and so was the coach, with Billy Cunningham stepping down as coach not long after the championship. Luckily, the team hired in-house and promoted assistant coach Matt Gaucus to head coach. Matt was focused primarily on the defensive end, where Cunningham had been more balanced. However, the same power behind the team simply wasn't there. The 76ers were starting to decline, dropping to 11th in defensive rating despite the main focus on defense, and thusly fall to 6th in net rating. While still in the upper percentage of the league, it was still a considerable drop after being the number 1 spot. Of course, teams like the Lakers and Celtics were also only getting better, widening the gap between the teams. This came into full picture when the 76ers lost both the 1984 and 1985 season to the Celtics, and then the Bucks the following year. To make matters worse, the quote all-star roster they had collected in 1983 started to show chips in its armor. Dr. J and other players that led the team had natural decline with age, putting more responsibility on the other players. Unfortunately, the roster simply lacked the capabilities to do so. This roster simply had no depth behind their starting 5, which of course was worse when some of these starting 5 started suffering injuries such as Andrew Toney's foot injury or Maurice Cheek's knee injury. The amount that they were paying for players like Moses Malone, being as massive as previously stated, caused the team to be tightly squeezed on where they could spend the rest of their money, leading to restrictions on what players they could sign, salary cap, and what players they could afford to keep and re-sign. As a result, the team made a lot of questionable trades or failed to re-sign simply because they did not have the resources or money to sustain itself. The biggest, of course, being Malone in 1986, where the 76ers gave away the first overall pick in the 1986 draft and star center, significantly weakening the team. Financial difficulties and roster changes led to a period of rebuilding, with the team focusing on developing young talent and acquiring draft picks. Similar trades followed, like Russ shown to the Indiana Pacers for Clement Johnson. While Johnson was a solid player, he didn't have the same impact that Malone would have, which affected the team's performance, and Maurice Cheeks, a key member of the 1983 championship team, went to the San Antonio Spurs for Johnny Dawkins and Jay Vincent. While Dawkins showed promise, he was plagued by injuries, and Vincent struggled to make a significant impact. The trend continued, with the decline being nowhere near subtle, with seasons such as 36 and 46 in 1988 and missing the playoffs for the first time since 1974, finally setting the alarm for a rebuild that should have already started years ago.
Tonight, on the season finale of Lincoln Heights.
More Cousin Skeeter next.
Part of a Cousin Skeeter double play.
The good news ending the 80s was that the 76ers had a bit of experience in regards to rebuilding. That's how they acquired their championship in the first place. After losing Wilt entering the 70s, the 76ers were a completely lost team. You heard of the 73-9 Warriors. Well, what about the opposite? In 1973, the 76ers won only 9 games for the entire season, the worst in league history, with reports that they were so bad that they simply stopped caring, going as far as drinking on the bench and sharing sodas at practice. A decade later, however, and they were holding the Larry O'Brien. So hope was that something similar could happen this decade, especially since they weren't starting at such of a low point. The bad news was they were entering the 90s. The league already had Michael Jordan, Clyde Drexler, Rodman, Patrick Ewing, David Robinson, and more to compete with, just at the start of the decade, and it was only going to get worse. Lynam replaced Matt Gawkins, who had a more player-friendly and offensive-focused coaching style. Lynam's tenure was marked by a stricter, more disciplined approach, which was a shift from Gawkins' more relaxed demeanor. Lynam's tenure was met with mixed reviews. While some appreciated his defensive focus and discipline, others felt that his coaching style was too rigid and did not translate into consistent success on the court. Also, the depth and injury issues only continued to persist, with Johnny Dawkins' knees, Sean Bradley's injuries, Derek Coleman's heartbeat, and Charles Barkley as well suffering injuries. These problems practically summarized the entirety of the early 90s for the 76ers. That was until in 1996, after an 18-win season, they managed to put the rebuild in full effect and get another draft pick that showed promise.
With the first pick in the 1996 NBA Draft, the Philadelphia 76ers select Allen Iverson from Georgetown University.
There are several documentaries, deep dives, critiques, analysis, or whatever you want to call them, covering AI's career. Allen Iverson was the most prolific player going into the draft, being selected first overall. His fame rivaled even Kobe himself for a couple years, who was selected 13th in the same draft. This excelled to the point that Allen Iverson was nicknamed The Answer. The answer to what, you may ask? Well, the answer to the question, who carries the new era of basketball? Or in other words, who will become the new face of the league now that MJ, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and so on are retiring, before people like LeBron were drafted? Speaking of MJ, a huge defensive force and argued the GOAT by many, Allen Iverson broke his ankles. He was known for his scoring proficiency, being able to twist and articulate its body to score in all sorts of situations, in the same way that a cat would always land on its feet. He even broke Wilt's record for 40+ in 5 straight games. He was efficient on both ends, being the scoring leader 4 times and steal leader 3 times. And of course that came with all the other accolades you would assume with that much praise, including Rookie of the Year. Well, if he was so great, why wasn't the so-called answer able to carry the 76ers to a championship again? Well, in classic old-school mentality fashion, Allen Iverson did exactly that. Scoring 40-plus a night and essentially carrying the team single-handedly. That was until Larry Brown entered the picture and literally said that Allen Iverson was playing, quote, not the right way, because he was a point guard that was shooting and not facilitating. After trying to essentially keep Iverson on a leash offensively, the 76ers started their first 22 games only 6-16, which to the 76ers meant ringing the trade alarm to further this rebuild. The 76ers managed to trade away Jerry Stackhouse, who ended up being an all-star, and in the MVP in the six-man ladder after leaving the 76ers. Finally, the 76ers did what should have been the plan from the first place and put Allen Iverson at the shooting guard position instead, and the 76ers actually saw some good success, and finally made the playoffs again. Unfortunately, the playoffs ended quickly with the Pacers and the elite force of Reggie Miller. At first glance, it seems like the Pacers absolutely destroyed the 76ers by sweeping them. However, the play-by-play tells a different story. The games often came down to a few final plays like missed free throws, missed clutch layups, and all around just bad luck in the last final minutes of each game. While that may seem like a positive progress for the 76ers, it was actually the opposite. Many articles came out that this was a new beginning happening in Philly, and they were right, but not the beginning of another chip, rather the beginning of a soap opera. Again, starring Larry Brown and Iverson. Again, I could likely make a whole 45 minutes on just this situation alone, and I might in the future, but many others already have, so I'll summarize it so that we can get moving closer to the present. Larry Brown continued to claim that Allen Iverson was playing the wrong way, and that he was writing up plays that he was, quote, talking to a brick wall, ironically stating that Iverson was ball hogging and not passing enough even after moving Iverson to shooting guard. This led to a rebellion and a division in the fan base. Allen Iverson rebelled by wearing his typical hip-hop and streetwear and breaking the norm, changing the game, which I have another documentary on. But regardless, it made a statement. Coupled with the fact that Iverson was late to games or skipped practice, people were starting to take notice. In retaliation, Larry Brown often benched or on occasion even suspended Iverson. This division came from the fact that they were two people who had their careers speak for themselves. Iverson was still averaging 30 points a game, over 2 steals, and won an MVP, while Larry Brown brought the team from a 37% record to a 68% record. Of course, there was only further division given the demographics on both sides of the issue. With this being the 90s, you can probably guess why. The fight for equality and an end to civil injustice was even greater before the turn of the millennia. The NBA and its players, more importantly, had been fighting the quote, thug moniker and other demeaning terms in the media that were only made worse by the malice at the palace later. Allen Iverson was a young black athlete that many saw was doing great things by going against his older traditional white coach. So where there was one person taking Iverson's side in the drama, saying he was standing up for himself and trying to reach his potential, there was the other person that claimed that Iverson was being narcissistic and insubordinate. Iverson even stated in interviews that when Larry Brown was stern with him, it reminded him and took him back to a bad place where he was called slurs and harassed by white law enforcement. Unfortunately, this showed the two-faced nature of the business side of the NBA, which still continues today, with Stephen A. Smith speaking hugely on it.
Allen Iverson is a cultural icon. He's a Hall of Famer, a Sixers legend, and has the nastiest crossover the world has ever seen. One thing he's not, however, is a member of the 76ers organization. He recently spoke to Bleacher Report's Taylor Rooks about his desire to help the team. Take a listen, y'all.
I've forgotten more basketball than some people know. And I know I can help an organization.
Anybody that knows anything about me in terms of covering the NBA knows that Allen Iverson is my man. I've covered him for the first 10 years of his career every day in Philadelphia. It's not a popular thing to say when you are a journalist or ultimately becomes a commentator and a pundit or whatever, but I love this brother. He's the little brother I never had. I'm the youngest of 6. And we're that tight. I have that level of love for him. And so anything that I say, it's important that I preface my comments by acknowledging that relationship that he and I have. We still talk all the time. He's watching now. Allen Iverson was not perfect. Allen Iverson came to practice late sometimes. Allen Iverson, in some people's eyes might have violated every dress code you can imagine. Allen Iverson, didn't always toe the line. He was a maverick. The tats, the cornrows, and all of this other stuff that comes with it that people either want to revere and praise him for or denigrate him for. All of those things you can side with. And when you think about corporate America and what it requires from us, particularly how I roll, if you make some of the mistakes that he made, you would sit up there and say, why should the Sixers want Allen Iverson there? So let me put that out there. And my response to that is the Sixers organization is the one organization that has no business taking this position. Allen Iverson is absolutely right. 1,000%. And I haven't spoken to the Sixers, but I will. Because this is some BS. I was not aware. I didn't ask Allen Iverson about this. I wasn't aware that he had absolutely no role with the Sixers organization. I don't know what the hell was wrong with me. I didn't think to ask. I assumed that they did have him in for. And let me tell you why I assumed that. Dan, Molly, the same Sixers organization that evidently doesn't employ Allen Iverson in any capacity is the same Sixers organization that used him for bobblehead night and retired his jersey and did everything they could to celebrate him in recent years to generate revenue and interest in their franchise when that bogus process was ongoing and you couldn't win a damn practice game, let alone a real NBA game.
Ultimately, the peak of the Iverson era was the 2001 season where they made it even all the way to the finals, but lost eventually to the Lakers campaigning Shaq and Kobe, who was only 12 picks behind Allen Iverson. If you want an even bigger piece of irony, during the 2000 season, Allen Iverson was almost traded to the Pistons, but wasn't. But Larry Brown also went to a different team in 2004 and won a championship. And that team, the Pistons. Meaning that they were this close to being traded and bickering again, just on another team. The feud continued as Iverson dealt with injuries and other similar issues with coaches, and still exploding with scoring, before requesting to be traded to the Nuggets in 2006.
Log on now and get your free success kit worth $100. Log on now to educationconnectiontv.com.
You are about to enter the courtroom of Judge Judith Scheindlin.
The period from 2006 to 2013 for the 76ers can aptly be described as the intermission era. This phase marked a time of transition and rebuilding, following the departure of their iconic star, Allen Iverson, in 2006. Iverson's trade to the Denver Nuggets signified the end of an era, leaving the leadership vacuum that the team struggled to fill. The 76ers, now without their mainstay, embarked on a journey that was marked by ups and downs, hoping to find a new identity and direction. The immediate aftermath of Iverson's departure was tough. the team grappled with inconsistency and a lack of star power. They finished the 2006 to 2007 season with a 35-47 record, missing the playoffs. Andre Iguodala emerged as a key player, but the absence of Iverson's leadership was palpable. Injuries to players like Samuel Delambert further complicated the team's efforts to find stability and success. In the following years, the 76ers continued to hover around a 50% record, making occasional playoff appearances but never progressing past the early rounds. The 2007 to 2008 season saw the team finish with a perfect 41-41 record and make the playoffs, only to be eliminated in the first round by the Detroit Pistons. The pattern repeated itself, with the team showing flashes of promise but ultimately falling short of significant achievements. A notable low point came during the 2008 to 2009 season when Elton Brand suffered an Achilles tendon injury, causing him to miss a significant portion of the season. The team finished with a disappointing 27-55 record, highlighting the importance of health and depth. The struggles underscored the need for a long-term plan to build a more resilient roster. Despite these challenges, there were bright spots. The team drafted promising young talent like Drew Holiday and Nikola Vucevic, who showed potential to be foundational pieces for the future. However, injuries continued to plague the team, and the lack of clear direction hindered their progress. Coaching changes, such as the hiring of Doug Collins, brought some stability but couldn't elevate the team beyond mediocrity. By the 2011 to 2012 season, the 76ers managed to make a notable playoff run, defeating the top-seeded Chicago Bulls in the first round before losing to the Boston Celtics in 7 games. This success hinted at the potential within the team, but also highlighted the gaps that still needed to be addressed. The following season, the team once again missed the playoffs, prompting a reevaluation of their strategy. This era, though not marked by dramatic successes or failures, laid the groundwork for what would become the process. The team's decision to fully embrace a long-term rebuilding strategy born out of the realization that incremental changes were insufficient. The intermission era was a time of experimentation and learning, setting the stage for a more aggressive and systematic approach for building a competitive team. In summary, the intermission era was categorized by its lack of major excitement and a steady, if unremarkable, performance, giving it its name. The team relied heavily on players like Andre Iguodala and faced numerous challenges, including injuries and coaching instability. While they made several playoff appearances, they couldn't progress beyond the Eastern Conference semifinals. This period of middling success underscored the necessity of a more comprehensive rebuilding plan, eventually leading to the initiation of the process in 2013.
Good game. We'll be back. Don't go away, folks.
People ask me all the time, George, what do I do with my idea for a new product? I tell them, call my friends at InventHelp.
Call InventHelp today for free information. InventHelp has been providing patent referrals, preparing ideas, and...
After the attempted rebuild from Iverson and a brief intermission with Iguodala, it was time for essentially take 2, a rebuild of the rebuild. And so began the reason you most likely clicked on this video, the process. This makes the timeline different from other teams because unlike teams like the Pistons, Wizards, Raptors, or Knicks that I've covered, these series of seasons with atrocious losses were intentional. As I'm sure many of you are aware, the process and subsequently the phrase, trust the process, came from the idea of exploiting the lottery system of the NBA, in which the worst teams get a better chance at higher draft picks. While the 76ers weren't the first teams to tank, the process certainly made the practice more public. And of course, there was an outcry. Many people bought into the idea and saw the long-term vision, and thus trusted the process, as they say. Several others were disappointed and protested. How dare a team get paid millions and intentionally try and play bad basketball in front of the fans? They were doing a disservice to the people that bought a ticket, similar to the argument with load management, which ironically Embiid is also the face of. As expected, the 76ers' attendance dropped by nearly 100,000 from the decade prior. And so the question is, was the plan all worth it? Well, I'll let you be the judge of that. For this section, due to the nature of the process and the direction the team took, I'm going to focus more on what the return value each year was, things like trades, drafts, re-signings, rather than focusing on injuries, coaching changes, or overall win-loss numbers, since again, saying the team only had a 19-63 record in 2013 to 2014 isn't as big of a deal if they are throwing deliberately. Starting with the end of the 2012 to 2013 season is when the process started, with the hiring of a new general manager who became infamous after his controversial idea, Sam Hinkie. Sam Hinkie obviously was coming in at around a low point of the team after all the previous events described. Of course, the first objective was to get increased star power and depth as is apparent in a rebuild. There's 3 avenues that can be taken to do that: trades, free agency, and the draft. Free agency is out of the picture as this is when the super team era was huge. Players wanted to join teams that were already succeeding to add to an already level up roster like the Spurs, Lakers, Heat, and so on. As evidenced by KD joining the Warriors a few years later. Trades were out of the picture for basically the same reason, but from the team perspective rather than the player. The stats weren't a secret. The 76ers were struggling, and as Sam Hinkie himself even said, every team has the same goal, to win a championship. It's a dog-eat-dog league, so for what purpose would anyone have to throw the 76ers a bone? That left only the draft. Except the previous GM had traded a lot of picks away in previous terrible trades, which ended up being one of the largest in NBA history, with 14 players moving teams. This left the 76ers essentially bare. So while the process was a controversial idea, it was still born out of necessity. But as stated earlier, not everyone was able to clearly see that. Despite the NBA ratings going up 4%, the 76ers dropped by 25% to only 23,000 watchers. For reference, in 2011 to 2012, when the Warriors were only 23-43 in wins, they still held 44,000 viewers. However, there was still a quote, small but loud group of fans that remained loyal to the franchise and sought to ride the ship to its destination. If the process wasn't already divisive enough, it didn't help that the first few moves of it were already questionable. The 76ers passed up on selecting Rudy Gobert late in the draft and Steven Adams just a pick later. They also passed up on Giannis, but reports were that there was limited footage of Giannis at the time, so I can't be too critical knowing what we know now versus what they knew then. However, MCW, who they did select, ended up winning Rookie of the Year. Then, the 76ers traded Drew Holiday, coming off an All-Star season, for Nerlens Noel, who was coming off an ACL injury that put him out for all of what would have been his rookie season for the Pelicans before the 76ers. Several different trades and signings happened, but nothing too exciting as you may expect with the rebuild. Several 10-day contracts, G League moves, and players that only averaged around 2 points. But it all led to something special. The 76ers managed to get the 3rd pick in the draft and selected Joel Embiid, who even today is not, if not the best player in the first round of the 2014 draft. I say first round because the 76ers also managed to get a 32nd and 39th pick in the second round, in which they picked KJ McDaniels and Jeremy Grant. Philly also selected Elfrid Payton in the first round with the 10th pick, but he was immediately traded to the Magic for Dario Saric and many other picks. And then they drafted Russ Smith with the 47th pick, 52nd pick, and a 54th pick, but traded it to the Spurs as well for Jordan McRae. Later, in 2014, Russ Smith was also traded to the Pelicans for Pierre Jackson. As 2014 continued, the main focus stayed to get picks, trading Thad Young for a 2016 first and 2 players, who were then also traded for some second-round picks as well. Brandon Davies was also traded for some picks along with KJ McDaniels from the previous draft. After it was all said and done, for 2015, the 76ers had 3 2015 second-round picks, 2 2016 first-round picks, 1 2018 first-round pick, 2 2018 second-round picks, 3 2019 second-round picks, and 1 2020 second-round pick. Not really a bad haul after previously having near nothing. Well, that was just step 1. Then came step 2, actually utilizing the picks. In the third pick, again in the 2015 draft, the 76ers missed out on Porzingis and Devin Booker. The 76ers then drafted 4 more players in the second round, but they all ultimately ended up also being trade fodder, ending with 1 2016 first round pick, 1 2017 first round pick, 1 2018 first round, ending with 1 2016 first round pick, 1 2017 first round pick, 1 2018 first round pick, 3 2018 second round picks, 1 2019 first round pick, 2 2019 second round picks, and the roster looking a bit wacky. In the 2016 draft, the 76ers selected Ben Simmons with the first pick in the draft. Back then, this was a logical choice. Ben Simmons had so much good press that multiple people were comparing him to LeBron.
But I had an epiphany Saturday morning, and I've thought about it for 2 nights, 3 days. Hey, LeBron, Ben Simmons is here. We're all good.
And I mean multiple people, which ultimately led to a lot of takes that aged like milk. Similar to how Zion was compared to LeBron as well, and now, yeah. Because of this is what led many to start crying out that the process was officially a success. 2 incredible stars after just a few years of win droughts. Despite the doubters, they had something to show for it with multiple lottery picks and all-star names. Unfortunately, this is also when things started to go downhill and returned to the status quo for the 76ers.
The rematch we've all been waiting for. The king on a quest, the champs looking for the repeat. Either way, it's about to get historic. The NBA Finals, it's on. Cavs, Warriors, Thursday at 9 on ABC.
This is where we get into the real meat of the video. The process was never the problem with the 76ers. Instead, it's what came after. Sam Hinkie had done something remarkable and turned a dead franchise into an organization with multiple draft picks and multiple stars. Of course, this caught the attention of the media and its fans, but more importantly, it caught the attention of the suits in charge of the NBA. For the businessman, they weren't impressed like everyone else. Instead, they were scared. Scared because of one simple reason. It was working. If other teams saw this method as a success, more would be inclined to try it. That causes a multitude of problems for the league. Entertainment would plummet as teams weren't trying to win, causing lower ratings as shown, which means less money for them. Speaking of money, Vegas and other suits also weren't happy with what was happening, as people could always bet against the 76ers and earn profit. The league was essentially being rigged, and betting companies obviously did not like that. So the NBA had to put their foot down and put a stop to it. As a result, Sam Hinkie resigned in 2016 for vague and confusing reasons. Resigned is in quotes, for reasons I explained prior. To many, this seemed to be Sam Hinkie pulling a Richard Nixon and quitting before he could get fired himself. Of course, none of this has been outwardly proven, as it would damage the NBA's reputation. But the writing is on the wall, with the popular belief being that NBA pressured the 76ers to get rid of Sam Hinkie for his revolutionary idea that was turning the league on its head. And afterwards, the NBA blackballed him from ever having an executive role afterwards, in which he has not had a single role in the NBA since. To fill this role, Jerry Colangelo took over as president and GM after serving as a chairman of basketball operations for the team and having several years of executive experience with Phoenix. However, in typical nepotism fashion, just 3 days later, Jerry would relinquish the role to his son Brian, with one simple rule and job: start winning games. Otherwise, the NBA would be onto them too. Colangelo followed the directive, and in 2017 to 2018, the 76ers managed to not only make it to the playoffs, but were eliminated in just 5 games in the second round to the Celtics. Even if they hadn't realized it then, the 76ers had just placed themselves in the exact same spot they were in before the process. The Simmons draft happened after Hinkie had already departed, and the 76ers blew their later picks on players that only averaged 6 points per game, rather than Pascal Siakam or DeJounte Murray. On top of that, the Nuggets also had a few picks later and got Jamal Murray. Sure, they had 2 stars now, but the problem was Simmons and Embiid were often injured and needed someone that not only added depth, but complemented both of them. The 76ers sought out to find that player that fit that exact mold, and traded up in the 2017 draft from the 3rd pick to the Celtics' 1st pick, selecting Markelle Fultz as the puzzle piece between Embiid and Simmons. In return, the Celtics selected Jason Tatum and left several notable players on the board, including De'Aaron Fox, Lauri Markkanen, Donovan Mitchell, and Bam Adebayo. After focusing all their attention on their 1st pick, the 76ers then threw their 2nd-round picks at the wall for players that either never played any minutes in Philly or were traded after just 1 season. Going into 2018, the mistakes only continued to add up as the 76ers drafted for Mikal Bridges but immediately traded him away, while also passing up on SGA just a pick later. However, on the bright side, the 76ers later that year in November of 2018 traded for an excellent player who was having problems with his previous Minnesota team, Jimmy Butler. The only problem was that the 76ers had the same exact mentality as Minnesota and thought that Jimmy Butler was too narcissistic, egocentric, and that they couldn't control him. Jimmy Butler didn't last a year before being traded to the Heat. If you want more information on that, check out my last video. But in doing so, Ben Simmons could be their primary ball handler. If you're wondering what kind of return they got for Jimmy Butler, they got Josh Richardson. Oh, were you waiting for me to say more? No, that's it. Just Josh Richardson. Then, we start to enter the infamous bubble years. The recent years is when we get into the real terrible decisions and some things you may be caught up on. To start things off, the 76ers signed Tobias Harris out of free agency. This decision would cause a large discourse amongst fans, as his contract ate up a lot of cap space and salary, and the stats simply did not back it up, choking their opportunities for better stars or better deals. On top of that, there was a coaching change to Doc Rivers. I won't go on my typical rant, but just know that I've already made multiple videos on how terrible Doc Rivers is, and the consensus is that making Doc Rivers your coach is immediately a death sentence for any team. On the positive side, the 76ers selected Tyrese Maxey, but he has often taken a back seat behind other guards like Ben Simmons. The process team was further fractured and split after a loss in the playoffs seemingly caused Ben Simmons to lose all confidence in himself, performing terribly and refusing to return for the 76ers. Ironically, another player was having the exact same problem on his team, and Ben Simmons was traded for James Harden. This trade was hyped beyond belief, with people like Kendrick Perkins saying the duo would be the next Shaq and Kobe. Well, that was just another aged like milk take, as the only thing the trade did was serve to take more minutes away from Maxey, who was developing nicely. However, the team was doing well enough that Embiid was in MVP conversations. Unfortunately, so was someone else. The Embiid-Jokic feud went on for a few seasons, with Embiid often getting injured when he was at the top of the ladder, with several, including me, stating that Embiid's MVP he eventually got was summed up as a sympathy pick. As time went on, James Harden started to have problems with the 76ers, which again I summarize in other videos covering Harden and Doc Rivers. With James Harden leaving, it left the lane open for Maxey, who would have been the first option of the 76ers, but coming off of his MVP, the 76ers still decide to run the ball through Embiid. With this ultimately failing, the 76ers have tried again to inject star power into the franchise, making the same mistakes as with Harden and trading for PG-13. Again, taking the ball more out of Maxey's hands even after several career highs and clutch playoff performances. That brings us to the present, where the 76ers have not made it past the second round since 1985. In an attempt to get out of mediocrity, the 76ers ended right back into it, ignoring their star Maxey and having the face of their franchise get into altercations with the media and get mixed up in drama, seemingly having an attitude problem similar to his predecessors of Ben Simmons and Harden, complaining about how much he plays, in which Shaq and other commenters have called him out. It seems the notion that the 76ers are a second-round team holds true for over 40 years, and it will continue until meaningful trades and draft picks are made. Otherwise, all progress that Hinkie made will dissolve, and the team will be left mediocre and stationary in the middle of standings for years to come, just like they have before. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I have many more videos like this on my channel for you to check out, and I upload every Thursday, alternating between scripted videos like this and podcast episodes. Anyway, if you did enjoy, be sure to like, subscribe, share the video around, leave a comment for the algorithm, all that cliche YouTuber stuff. We are trying to hit 25K for the end of this year, hashtag 25/425. And I will see you all in the next one. Peace out.
This is not okay. This needs to stop now.